DreamChaser has been ready to fly since 2004, but it's still on the ground. 20 years. Why? It literally cannot fit inside any rocket. But SpaceX just revealed a secret 18.6-meter fairing that could change everything. There's a massive catch NASA doesn't want you to know. While SpaceX launches weekly, this winged spacecraft worth millions just sits there. What's really happening? Will this finally solve the nightmare? Let's dive right in. Picture this. January 2025. A photo leaks online showing SpaceX testing something massive. Not just any fairing, an 18.6-meter monster that changes everything for DreamChaser. But here's what nobody saw coming. This wasn't planned for DreamChaser at all. This extended fairing was designed for military missions and NASA's Lunar Gateway. Pure coincidence or perfect timing? For 20 years, DreamChaser has been the spacecraft equivalent of having the world's best race car with no road to drive on. Ready since 2004, this winged beauty can carry 5,500 kilograms to space, land on any runway like a regular airplane, and do it all reusably. Meanwhile, every other spacecraft either crashes into the ocean or lands in the middle of nowhere. But there's a brutal reality check. DreamChaser is 9 meters long and 4.5 meters wide. Those wings that make it special, they're exactly what's been keeping it grounded. SpaceX's Falcon 9 fairing is only 5.2 meters wide. It's like trying to fit a commercial airplane through your garage door. Here's the maddening part. SpaceX launches Falcon 9 rockets almost every week. Routine, reliable, boring even. But DreamChaser just sits there, watching launch after launch, mission after mission, completely unable to participate. The most reliable rocket in history can't carry the most versatile spacecraft ever built. Think about the irony. While Dragon capsule splashes down in the ocean, requiring ships, recovery crews, and days of logistics, DreamChaser could just roll up to a gate at LAX and unload cargo like a FedEx truck. While Boeing's Starliner lands in remote desert areas, making equipment retrieval a nightmare, DreamChaser uses regular airport runways that exist everywhere. Sierra Space made a deal with United Launch Alliance for their Vulcan Centaur rocket. Finally, a rocket with enough room. But then reality hit. Vulcan Centaur became the rocket that couldn't. Delay after delay after delay. Industry insiders started calling it Vulcan Maybe instead of Vulcan Centaur. Meanwhile, SpaceX is launching customer payloads faster than some companies can manufacture them. Then January 2025 happened. That leaked photo wasn't just any fairing. It was SpaceX's answer to military demands for bigger, more capable rockets. The Pentagon wanted spacecraft that could launch quickly, operate secretly, and land anywhere. Sound familiar? That's exactly what DreamChaser offers. This extended fairing is 18.6 meters tall, 3.5 meters taller than the standard version. For the first time in DreamChaser's 20-year nightmare, there's finally a door big enough for it to fit through. But here's the catch that has Sierra Space executives losing sleep. This fairing is expensive and non-reusable. Remember, SpaceX's entire business model depends on reusing everything. Boosters land and fly again. Fairings are caught by boats and reused. Even Dragon capsules fly multiple missions. But this extended fairing? Too heavy, too complex to recover. Every DreamChaser launch would cost significantly more than a standard mission. While DreamChaser was stuck waiting for a rocket, something catastrophic happened to its competition. Boeing's Starliner, the spacecraft that beat DreamChaser for NASA's astronaut contract back in 2014, became aerospace's biggest embarrassment. Thruster failures, software glitches, helium leaks. 2 astronauts who were supposed to stay 8 days got stranded for 8 months. NASA had to call SpaceX for a rescue mission. The spacecraft that was supposed to provide backup to Dragon became the spacecraft that needed backup. Suddenly, DreamChaser's 20-year wait doesn't look like failure. It looks like vindication. NASA desperately needs alternatives to SpaceX. They need spacecraft that can launch quickly for emergency missions. They need vehicles that protect delicate scientific equipment during landing. They need DreamChaser. But will Sierra Space have the courage to bet everything on SpaceX's expensive extended fairing? Here's something most people don't understand about space missions. Getting back is just as important as getting there. When Dragon returns from the space station, it slams into the Pacific Ocean. The impact forces are enormous. Any delicate scientific experiments? Potentially damaged or destroyed. DreamChaser's wings change the entire equation. It glides to a landing like a smaller, simpler space shuttle. No violent ocean impact, no complex recovery ships, no days waiting to access your cargo. Scientists can walk up to their experiments within hours instead of weeks. The Shooting Star cargo module gives DreamChaser 33 cubic meters of pressurized space, almost 4 times more than Dragon. For space station resupply missions, this is revolutionary. More supplies, more experiments, more capability, all delivered safely to any airport runway on Earth. Just when DreamChaser's moment seemed to arrive, Sierra Space faced internal chaos. Late 2024. Their CEO stepped down unexpectedly. The company that had waited 20 years for its breakthrough suddenly didn't have leadership. This wasn't just corporate reshuffling. This was existential crisis. NASA is watching. SpaceX dominates the market. Boeing is failing spectacularly. Sierra Space couldn't afford uncertainty. The new leadership faced an impossible decision: stick with the unreliable Vulcan Centaur, or gamble everything on SpaceX's expensive extended fairing. But there's precedent for fresh leadership changing everything. Remember Blue Origin? Years of promises, no results. Then 2023, new leadership takes over. 2025, New Glenn finally launches successfully. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to make the hard decisions previous leadership couldn't. Here's the brutal math nobody wants to discuss. SpaceX's extended fairing could double DreamChaser's launch costs. We're talking about potentially $200 to $300 million per mission instead of $100 to $150 million. For a company that's already spent hundreds of millions over 20 years, this is a massive financial risk. But consider the alternative. Vulcan Centaur launches maybe 3 times per year when everything goes perfectly. SpaceX launches Falcon Heavy whenever customers need it. Reliability versus cost. Frequency versus expense. The new leadership has to choose which gamble is bigger, paying more for launches that actually happen, or paying less for launches that might never occur. Think bigger than just space station cargo missions. DreamChaser's runway landing capability makes it the FedEx of space. Launch from California, land in Europe. Launch from Florida, land in Japan. No ocean recovery, no desert landing strips, just regular airports worldwide. The military implications are staggering. While Dragon requires tracked recovery ships that broadcast their location, DreamChaser just needs a runway. For classified missions, that's the difference between operational security and operational exposure. Don't be surprised if the Pentagon becomes DreamChaser's biggest customer. Elon Musk recently suggested Starships might launch from Australia. If SpaceX is thinking globally, why not DreamChaser? Those runway landings mean international operations become simple logistics instead of complex diplomatic negotiations. This isn't just about making something bigger. SpaceX had to completely redesign the fairing structure, create new deployment mechanisms, and test everything from scratch. The engineering challenges are mind-boggling. The fairing has to protect DreamChaser through the violent ascent, then deploy perfectly to release a $200 million spacecraft. Any failure means losing years of development and potentially killing the entire program. The precision required makes landing a booster look simple. But here's what's really revolutionary. This extended fairing proves SpaceX can adapt their systems for unique customers. They're not just a launch provider anymore. They're solving aerospace's hardest problems. If they can make DreamChaser work, what other impossible projects become possible? If DreamChaser succeeds with Falcon Heavy, it reshapes everything. SpaceX gains a premium customer and proves their heavy lift versatility. DreamChaser finally escapes its 20-year prison. NASA gets the backup they desperately need. Scientists get better cargo return capabilities. But the losers, Boeing's Starliner becomes completely irrelevant. United Launch Alliance's Vulcan Centaur loses its most important customer before it's even established. Blue Origin's New Glenn faces tougher competition before it's proven reliable. This isn't just about one spacecraft anymore. This is about which companies survive the next decade of space commercialization. Sierra Space says Tenacity, the first DreamChaser, will launch in the third quarter of 2025. That's months away. After 20 years of waiting, everything comes down to this decision. Vulcan, Centaur, or Falcon Heavy? Reliability or cost? Playing it safe or betting everything? The decision they make determines not just DreamChaser's fate, but potentially America's space future. NASA can't depend on SpaceX forever. The military needs diverse launch options. Scientists demand better cargo return. DreamChaser could provide all of that if someone has the courage to finally pull the trigger. Success changes everything. If DreamChaser proves runway landing works, expect every aerospace company to develop wing vehicles. If it fails, capsule designs might dominate space transportation forever. But success means more than technical validation. It means American space independence. Right now, if SpaceX has problems, NASA has problems. DreamChaser represents diversification, backup capability, and technological advancement all in one package. Here's something that might surprise you. SpaceX is already negotiating with Australia about Starship operations. Landing rockets offshore, towing them to port, maybe even launching from Australian territory. If SpaceX is thinking globally, DreamChaser's runway landing makes it perfect for international operations. Imagine the possibilities. Launch from Texas, deliver cargo to the space station, land in Germany. Quick turnaround, easy maintenance, global reach. This isn't just about space anymore. This is about creating the world's first truly global space transportation network. The U.S. military is watching DreamChaser very closely. That extended fairing SpaceX developed? Military missions drove its creation. The Pentagon wants spacecraft that launch quickly, operate quietly, and land anywhere. DreamChaser checks every box. While Dragon requires ocean recovery with trackable ships, DreamChaser uses any military airfield worldwide. For classified missions, that's game-changing. Don't be surprised if military contracts dwarf NASA's space station missions. 20 years of development, hundreds of millions invested, multiple NASA contracts signed, new leadership installed, extended fairings developed, Boeing failing spectacularly, NASA desperate for alternatives. Every piece is finally in position. The only question remaining, will Sierra Space have the courage to bet everything on SpaceX's extended fairing? Or will they continue waiting for a Vulcan Centaur launch that might never come? The greatest space plane ever built sits ready for flight. The most reliable rocket company ever created has a fairing big enough to carry it. The most desperate customer in aerospace history needs exactly what it offers. What happens next determines whether DreamChaser finally fulfills its 20-year promise or remains forever grounded by the very wings that make it special. So here we are. 20 years of waiting, one leaked photo, and a decision that could reshape America's entire space program. DreamChaser represents something bigger than just another spacecraft. It's about whether we're willing to take bold risks when the safe path leads nowhere. The extended fairing exists. The technology works. NASA desperately needs backup options. All the pieces are finally aligned after 2 decades of frustration. But the biggest question isn't technical anymore. It's whether Sierra Space will choose expensive reliability over cheap uncertainty. What happens in the next few months doesn't just determine DreamChaser's fate. It determines whether innovation wins over bureaucracy, whether 20 years of persistence pays off, and whether America gets the space transportation diversity it desperately needs. Here's what I want to know. Do you think Sierra Space should bet everything on SpaceX's extended fairing or stick with Vulcan Centaur? And more importantly, if you were making a $500 million decision that could change space history, which risk would you take? The clock is ticking. The stakes couldn't be higher. And we're about to find out if the greatest space plane ever built finally gets its moment to shine. NASA astronauts just revealed SpaceX's Crew Dragon is 100 times better than Russia's Soyuz. For decades, astronauts called Soyuz a cosmic sardine can. Cramped, buttons everywhere, packed shoulder to shoulder. Now, Dragon feels like a sci-fi movie with touchscreens and spacious seats. Astronaut Soichi Noguchi said it best. The Dragon is the best. But how did SpaceX pull this off? Let's dive right in. Here's what NASA doesn't want you to see. This is astronaut Don Pettit inside Soyuz, and his face tells the whole story. Once strapped in, my heels are nearly in contact with my butt. I am tied down at 8 points to a form-fitting couch, making it difficult to move anything other than my arms. But wait, it gets worse. Dutch astronaut André Kuipers was even more blunt. It's much too small and tight. These aren't just complaints. These are desperate pleas from people trapped in what they called a cosmic sardine can. Think about this. You're about to rocket into space at 17,500 miles per hour, and you can't even move your legs. You're folded like a pretzel, shoulder to shoulder with two other people, staring at hundreds of buttons and switches that could kill you if pressed wrong. This was the reality for every NASA astronaut for nearly a decade. But here's the question that haunted space agencies worldwide. Why did the most advanced space program on Earth accept this torture? 2011 changed everything. When the space shuttle retired, NASA went from being the kings of space to begging for rides. They had just shut down the most sophisticated spacecraft ever built, one that could carry 7 astronauts in relative comfort. Now they were paying Russia $90 million per seat to cram their astronauts into a 1960s death trap. Imagine being a NASA astronaut who flew on the shuttle. You remember the spacious cockpit, the ability to float around, the dignity of commanding the most advanced vehicle ever created. Then suddenly you're stuffed into Soyuz like cargo, unable to move, completely helpless. The psychological impact was devastating. American astronauts went from pilots to passengers, from explorers to tourists, from heroes to humiliated